Thank you so much for joining me today for the webinar for reviewing CRM for leadership. I am Courtney Kearney, founder and owner of C. Kearney Consulting. We are so glad to have you today on the webinar. I wanted to let you know that we have a ton of free resources out on our website. I'm going to drop the URL into the chat so that you can check that out. There we go. It should post now. Out on our website, you can go to our events tab and see that we have upcoming free webinars. We also have some paid webinars that are specifically focused on CoCentral. We also have a CRM specific user group call on the second Thursday of the month. We also have all of our past webinars out on our website. So if you did miss one, you can go and check those out. You can also click on the CKC stories and check out some blog articles or articles written by some guest posts so that you can check those out. These are not yet up on the website, but they are coming. We have the CKC free webinars on the second Tuesday of the month. May, we're going to focus on how to use CRM for business development. In June, we're going to talk about auditing your CRM. We're going to have companion webinars on the fourth Tuesday of the month. May, again, we're going to do CoCentral specific for BD, and then also how to audit your CoCentral account. So the idea is the second Tuesday of the month webinar is general system agnostic. And then on the fourth Tuesday, we're going to dive into just the specifics of CoCentral. So if you would like to register for leadership and how leaders in our industry are using CoCentral specifically, sign up to attend on the 20th. One last thing is, if you have not done so already, if you want to jump over to our YouTube, we're trying to hit 100 subscribers. So it would be great if you could help us and click that subscribe button. Diving into CRM for leadership. Really, when we're talking about CRM and how people are using it, it comes down to DDDM, so data-driven decision making. What kind of decision maker are you? If you're not the leader, answer this for maybe your leaders in your firm. Do you tend to make decisions based on facts and figures, emotions? Those can be both positive and negative. Intuition is an emotion, fear. Is it more politically based, holding out on certain things because of an election year, things that might be happening locally? Are you making decisions based on past experience? Data-driven is different than data-aware. So really, I feel like our industry does a really good job of being data-aware, so monitoring and tracking, but that is simply being informed of the data that your company is tracking or gathering. To be data-driven, that is when you shift to action. That is when your data and information plays a central role in every decision at every level. We're going to dive into this a little bit more, but first I have a poll for you. So let me launch that. On a scale of 1 to 5, how data-driven is your firm? 1, not data-driven at all. 2, we gather data a lot. 3, data-aware but lack action. Partially data-driven. And then 5 would be your completely data-driven. Looks like we've had about 57% participation. I'll give that another 20 seconds so we can get everybody to vote on the poll that is launched. Perfect, we're at 80%. I'll give it 5 more seconds. All right, we'll end the poll, excuse me. All right, so it looks like we've got 8%, or is that 6%? 6% data gather only, 12% lack action, data aware, 76% partially, and 6% completely data driven. So this is definitely more than I expected. So it's good to see that so many of you, 67%, are in that partially data driven. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll be armed with a little bit more tips to take that to a full 5. And then those that are in the 2 and 3 can bump up a step. And for the 6% that are completely data driven, I do have some slides to open up a little bit of discussion. So feel free to pop that into the Q&A or the chat. Thank you for participating in that poll. Some common misconceptions that leaders have, or that can be accompanied with data-driven decision-making, whether it's by employees of the data-driven leaders or just of companies that are data-driven. One of the common misconceptions is being data-minded or data-driven removes the human element. And actually, it's the opposite. Really looking at the data will tell you the human element, or what are the humans in the company doing? What are your clients doing? That is the human element. So really it doesn't remove it, but rather it puts you more in touch with it so that you can actually have some tangibles to go along with that. Data must be perfect first. This is one where I see kills so much of the momentum. It really is about progress, not perfection. So one of the things that we tell our clients from a consulting standpoint is really hone in on the decisions that you want to make and get those specific data sets ready. Don't try to do it all at once. If you try to gather all of your project data for every single project you've ever done in the history of your company, you will have data paralysis. But rather, like, look at the AIA 305, the in progress and the completed projects. There's a set data. There is a data set that is there that is very specific. So owner, location, city and state, just taking those bits of data. Not everything else has to be perfect. You don't have to have a full scope or technical aspects for every single one of those projects, but really just the high level so that you can make decisions accordingly. So your data does not have to be perfect. Gathering data isn't enough. There must be action. Data-driven companies aren't in touch with reality. Again, I think that that kind of ties into that human element piece. Looking at the data does not mean that your company turns into a bunch of robots, but really it allows you to have the tangible of what is actually going on, either in your business, in your companies and operations, whatever the data sets are that you're looking at. It really does help you connect the numbers and the facts and figures with your gut check. We'll look at that here in a second, but really it ties those things together. This leads me to our first Q&A. Did I miss any misconceptions? We had it on the description that we were going to talk about misconceptions today of being data-driven. So did you have any before this webinar coming in, any misconceptions or ones that as I talked that maybe came to your mind, or things that you have thought about companies or leaders that are data-driven? Feel free to drop it into the chat or the Q&A. Doesn't look like we have any, so I'll go to the next one. What are the biggest data challenges for leaders today? I hear all the time a unified data source, having a single source of truth being the biggest challenge for leaders. The next one being an integrated system. So things not just unified in a single source, but if you have things like an accounting software also talking to your CRM, also talking to an operations or a project management system, all of those being integrated so that things don't have to be double entered. garbage data. We all know garbage in, garbage out, but really thinking about also garbage data being empty sets of data. So if you're trying to make a decision on what you need to hire for and looking at your workload capacity, if the report that you're looking at is missing data sets, then that is garbage data, even though it was entered into the system. If it is missing from a report that you are trying to make decisions off of, that can lead to garbage data as well. Misunderstood data. We're going to talk about data storytelling here in a little bit, but misunderstood data is one big challenge that we hear from leaders that are data conscious. And that data is a lifestyle, not a diet. So really, when you look at being data driven, that is a decision of how you will run a business, what your culture will be as a company, not a one-time project that has a start and end date. So when we think about, I'm going to be bathing suit ready by May, I'm going to think about a short-term diet. If I think about I want to be healthy and fit, that is more of a lifestyle decision. So when I think about data as a data-driven leader, I fall more into that lifestyle. I want to have that in the culture versus, all right, for this X period of time, we're going to get this data set in, and then we're going to set it and forget it. What are the challenges that you see? Did I miss any? So opening it up for you to drop into chat or Q&A. So are there challenges that are data specific or that keep you from being more data driven or being able to answer 5 when we rated ourselves? Some of those challenges that maybe I missed. I do like that one. Feedback loop processes. We're going to talk about that in a couple slides, but that is definitely a good one. Thank you, Tim. That's a really good one. The perceived fear. So this kind of ties into the misconceptions too. The perceived fear of the loss of freedom, being a slave to the numbers. Data entry, the PMs and getting them engaged. That was great feedback. Thank you so much. Some of those we're going to address in the next couple slides. Thank you for that feedback. I thought we were all data driven, but I believe maybe now hearing you speak that we are back at a 4 and that we're becoming more and more that way. Thank you so much for that feedback, Terry. Absolutely. I think it's all about perception, right? I have a tag data loving marketer, and I would say that I definitely am a data leader for our industry, but I also attend things outside of our industry because I always want to stay top of mind, current, what's going on. And there are data conferences that have nothing to do with our industry. So one of them was the Data Changemaker Festival. And let me tell you, I thought I was data conscious. Then I attend the Data Changemakers Festival and it opened my eyes, which is exciting that there's always room to grow. There's always places that we can take this further. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. What leaders should be looking at? Really, dashboards are for your rear view mirror. Data stories are your front window. Where are you going? Where are you headed? So your dashboards are really telling you what's happened in the past. There are a couple dashboards, depending on what system you're using, that can be a little forward projecting, depending on your forecasting widgets, things like that. But for the most part, your dashboards are telling you what's already happened. It's tracking data that has already been entered. What you want to move towards is data stories that are telling you what's coming, that are predictive, that are looking into the future based on some of the information of the past. Leaders should not be looking at general dashboards. They don't work. That's the easiest way to misunderstand data for sure. You want to narrow down and customize dashboards for your leadership. One of the Data Changemaker Festivals sessions that I attended that was really great, the owner of the leader or the owner of the company said, I shared at a all hands meeting what dashboards I am looking at. I don't want it to be a secret of what I'm looking at and the data that I see, so that everybody knows and is on the same playing field. You can see these dashboards and these widgets as well. And then you can customize it accordingly to what you're looking at. But he wanted to let everybody know what he was looking at. I think that's a great place to start as leaders. Having clean data so that that is prioritized at a firm or at the leadership level. So we're going to talk about being data stewards here in a little bit, but really setting that priority as the leader of the firm is important, so that you can communicate as a leader, this is what I'm looking at, but this is why it's important that you keep your opportunities and your pursuits up to date. This is why it's important to keep your project cost or project completion dates up to date in whatever systems. All of that starts to fall into place, and you create data stewards because you're communicating how you're using your data and the data that you're looking at. Now, on the flip side, I know we're not all leaders on this call. Some of us are attending this to help our leaders. So what should employees be doing? Again, striving to be data stewards. What does that mean? Really, when you have a culture of data stewards, that stewardship falls on every single employee to keep their information up to date, whatever that is, whether that's operation data, financial data, marketing data, whatever that looks like for you and your role. It's taking ownership of that. It's also about becoming comfortable with data information, so that even as a marketing coordinator or a business developer, that you bring certain data sets to a meeting and say, hey, I think that this pursuit would be good for us because of these past 10 projects. That is making decisions based on data, not just, I really like this project, let's go for it. But really looking at specific hard tangibles is important. Again, that actually is more freedom than being tied to, I need to fight for this pursuit because I feel like it. So you're not becoming a slave to the numbers as much as they're empowering you to make better decisions. Incorporating it into daily conversations. So this starts at all levels, but again, kind of that example that I gave of this is the pursuit that I want to chase, or this project is profitable because of this, or I really feel like the last 7 K through 12 projects that we did are not as profitable. Let me run some numbers, work with accounting, or if you have that information in a system you already have access to, run those analytics to say, actually, wow, K through 12 is more profitable than some of these others. And checking your gut about, why did I feel like they were less profitable? Is that because they take longer, they have more scope creep? Is it because, certain contracts we give money back at the end, and so it just feels like we're losing money? What is that in line with how you're doing your business? But having that in your conversations is important. And ties back to that data stewardship, because if some PM comes and says, I just feel like we're losing money on K through 12. Well, why do you feel like that? Do you have data to back that up? Moving from dashboards in Excel into stories and narratives. So really presenting a leader with just an Excel spreadsheet is moving to the way of the past. And I would challenge us to instead, those of us with the data, not just give them a dashboard to look at or an Excel spreadsheet or an Excel turned into a chart, but rather telling the story. So one of the things that we do is we work with our clients to create that narrative. So when you look at, say, a pipeline, you have the narrative and based on our company, we need to keep X amount of dollars to keep the lights on. Let's work our way backwards. So that means that if we have a hit rate of 64%, then we need to keep 64% more of what we need to keep the lights on, or the opposite of that, to pursue or to be shortlisted. If we know that 50% of the time we're shortlisted, then we need to double that. And now you know how big your pipeline needs to be at the very beginning to work backwards. So if you know what that number is, when you look at the pipeline, you can say, okay, this should be a red flag because our pipeline should be at X dollars and we're $2 million short. We need to either fill that up, or looking at your probability percentages, are we just more confident in what we have in our pipeline? And we are projecting that our hit rate's not going to be 64%, but rather 82%. And then your pipeline doesn't have to be as full. But those are the story narratives that should be being told when you're looking at these widgets. So one of our clients looks at the projection of your workload. So when we look at things starting by start date, when we have start dates that are in the next quarter, so for now, Q2, Q3, and we are still pursuing those, and those are not in shorter leads like the agreement phases, then our alarm should be going off that either we've already lost that or the start date has slipped. It's not really going to start next quarter because we should be closer to winning it and closing that deal. Those are the things that you can start to help your users and your leaders tell those stories so that everybody's on the same page when they look at a dashboard or they look at a widget or a certain data set, that everybody's telling the same story, that they all know what is happening with that data. Because what I find is that sometimes when I say, okay, this is our pipeline, and I say, what does that mean? And Josh goes, oh, well, it's a funnel. That means we have to have a lot up at the top. That is true, but if you look at it, that funnel is not actually agile. It's not adapting to this true shape of what it is. It's just always a funnel. So you have to drill down to go, we have a lot in this phase, and in the top of the funnel, it's actually half of the size that it should be. Looking at that information. And then if I ask, what does the funnel look like? And Diane says, well, the funnel to me just means that we're winning work, we're chasing work. We all have to make sure that we are on the same page. This is back to the Tim's comment. So data should be a constant feedback loop. Some of what this means is that when you are chasing work all the way through the completion of the project, how are you doing with the fee that you thought you were going to get versus the fee that you ended with? Are those in line? Historically, do you have slippage? Do you gain fees by the end? What does that look like from beginning to end? That is just one example of feedback loop so that you can use that data to have a checks and balance. You can also use that feedback loop in other areas with your CX mapping or your CX plan. So looking at how you're interacting with your clients, different data points. So whenever you're pursuing the work, what is your client's opinion of you versus when you are halfway through the project versus when you complete the project versus a year after completion of the project. Having those different touch points and data sets is important so that you're continually having a consistent feedback loop of your data sets. Information should align with how you're feeling. Again, that gut check of, I don't know that this is a good path to go down. Should we be opening an office in another location? My gut tells me we should, but what do the facts and figures and data sets say? What is the condition of that market? What is our market share strength compared to what they have available? All of those things should also be in line with how you feel. One of the examples that I heard during that data set or that data changemaker festival was also the gut feeling of, I feel like we're losing for a consistent reason, but I don't know why. I don't know what that is. So they ended up adding a field when they lost a pursuit onto their opportunity records that said, why did we lose this? Now, it was painful to fill that in of why you're losing things, but after 6 months of tracking that data, it became very clear what it was. And it was a lack of communication, a lack of their client, understanding their proposals and their responses to the client. Eye-opening, they changed their communication, they used more graphics, and then their reasons for losing were no longer communication. So really looking at that and helping the data test what your gut feeling is. those also should be kept in alignment. All right, so now we're gonna do a little poll. This is a multiple selection, so not just a single answer. This one is, of all the actions that we've kind of talked about, what are the ones that you have put in place that you're using? Specific customized data or dashboards, excuse me, not just generalized. Daily data hygiene practices. Producing data stories and data conversation. Data is out of Excel and in a system or in a tool. You can select more than just one. What worries me is it looks like no one is selecting any. So I'm worried that this poll might not be working. Okay, here it goes. They're coming in now. Whew. Information aligns with people's feelings and guts. Data is a consistent feedback loop. Employees are comfortable with data, and everyone is a data steward. Oh, perfect. So far, it looks like we've had answers or someone select every single option. That's great. And then if there is a situation where you don't feel like you can check any of them, then this is your to-do list. This is definitely the areas that you can start to chip away at. All right, we are at 3 minutes left in the webinar. So I'm gonna go ahead and end it, even though we're at 61-ish% participants. So sorry if I cut you off, and there does seem to be some sort of delay going on too. So I apologize if I cut you off. Okay, we're gonna share the results. Great, it looks like 85% are using customized dashboards. That is great to hear. Daily data hygiene practices, 31%. 77% are out of Excel and in a system. That is fantastic. It looks like we have room to grow for the data stories and data narratives, incorporating it into our conversations, the feedback loop, and having maybe a campaign about data stewardship in our companies. Thank you so much. The question on the chat, how many people do you give access to for data inputting? Wanting to have only a few hands in the pot versus having feedback loops is an issue for us. So I do think that the answer to that depends on what data sets you're talking about. I think limiting your financial data access is very important so that you do have gatekeepers there. I think things like your client relationship management tools, where if it's talking about your client information, addresses, phone numbers, emails, I feel like that is one that you can have a lot of access to. Having your pursuits, depending on if you have seller doers in the company, those should all have access, or at least access to the people who need to be putting that in. So I think it depends on the information that we're talking about. Tim, feel free to follow up if I didn't fully answer your question. So the next one, future of CRM and data, specifically for our industry in the AEC industry. I think that we'll continue to see a push for unified information. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean a one system fits all, but through integration, having unified data. Data storytelling is definitely going to become bigger. I would definitely recommend checking out Game Changer, that app, or Narrative Science. They are a big player in that realm, and really looking at your data storytelling. So one of the examples that I gave for the Game Changer is that when you're playing in Little League, there is an app that you can follow your kids playing the Little League game, and it gives you stats and a scorecard. Well, I didn't play Little League, so I don't really understand how to read a scorecard. So the app also gives me a narrative or a story that I can follow based on the scorecard. So things like Johnny is up to date, he swings and he misses. Johnny is up to bat again and he makes a home run. So and so and so and so get runs, they were on base, blah, blah, blah. That someone who played the game can understand looking at a scorecard. I need the words put to the data, and that is all automated. That is all narrative science working in the background to create that story based off of the scorecard. We can do that similarly on our projects for our clients. We can do that for our proposals so that our scopes and stories based on our projects are put together by data so that we can start to use some of that data storytelling in our industry as well. And push still for predictive and not just analytical. Data accountability and comprehensive data sets, I think, are the future. Now, outside of our industry, there are really cool things happening in AI and things like that. Again, the storytelling is a piece of that, but I think that we're a little bit behind on that respect. So some of that cool stuff will definitely trickle in, but this is kind of where I see our industry focused right now for the near future. All right, so the last thing that I wanted to end with, oh, I'm totally over time. Oh, I got too wrapped up. Data utopia. If I had to create a data utopia, what would it be? Single source of truth, data being a regular part of everyone's day, from data entry to maintenance to usage, and that everybody wakes up reading the company's daily data story about their company, what's going on in the company, what's the future, where are we headed, how's the growth, that data story for your specific company. If you have a data utopia and want to share it, feel free to drop it into the chat or the Q&A. The last thing is to remind you that our next webinar is next Tuesday. I'll be at a conference the 4th Tuesday of the month, so we're actually bumping it up. So feel free to come and celebrate my birthday with me as we talk about co-essential for leadership on 4/20. Hopefully you got some great information out of this session today. Thank you for joining us, and I appreciate you spending the time.